There it is. Well, I was noodling with this saw, and this is that highway saw, and kind of came to a stop. And I think I know what happened. I think it's seized up tight. We're going to pull the top end off of this saw and see if my speculation is correct. You do have the possibility of bore alignment issues. I can pretty much tell you right now that that's not what's happening here. It was running fine. And just went boah and stuck. And there it is. Crank is fine. Plenty of lubrication. And plenty of lubrication in the bottom end too. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that crank at all. The top end failed on this. It's stuck. And I'm not really seeing a clear reason why. There's plenty of lubrication. I think it just got hot and stuck. That's what I think. Damn thing just quit. Couldn't handle the stress. So I guess we have one of two options here. Try to clean it up and just run it some more. I mean, that's option number one. Or option number two is put a different top end on it. since it'll be on the truss, you can put as many as you can fit. Yeah, 2-inch works, right? Yeah, this will work. The one on the very far end, not that one, the one all the way to the wall is the same motor configuration that one is. Yeah, it does. It's the same setup. Okay. It's like this one. I'm just making this right. Because you're going to hang the motor on those. So you want the width to be the same as the motor mount. It's going to be like right there. Well, the motor mount, they're this far apart. You're going right in there. I mean, the in-between, that's how far you had it before. So for the larger motor, you want it about like that. All right. Calipers. Oh, just in time. Winter decided to show up. We just finished cleaning out the garage, but I was able to get the tractor set up. Got more cleaning to do, but got my snowplow rig. Yep, we got more saw work in. I'm gonna have to get to that pretty soon. In the meantime, I've got a couple of things I'd like to do before I get back to work. Here's a pile of donation saws, and I believe they're steel 441s, but we're gonna pick through the rubble. I think that's gonna be a fun build. You know, I've had some fun with a steel brand in the past. I've got a couple of 441s. I really want to do a series on them. Carcass. There's 3 case sets in there. But you know something? This was the genesis of the whole aftermarket thing for me. You know? I've got some plastic and I've got some cases. And I've got some OEM 441s. Let's see if we can't put together a good solid OEM build and some aftermarket, just like we had done with 372s. I think that'll be fun. So, but before I get back to work, my middle son came and basically reorganized the garage with help from my wife. She and I put together those motor stands to help organize my motor projects, and middle son organized some of my saw storage up there in the hanging off the ceiling. Put the Checkmate in the back burner for a little while, and my son brought this stuff up and cleaned it up a little bit, and I think I'm within striking distance of actually getting that put back together, which would be really nice just to get it fired up, I think. But anyway, back to this. It's been sitting for a couple of years, and before I got it, it had sat for another couple of years. So what we're looking at here is a mid-90s Arctic Cat, and it's got a 600cc 3-cylinder Suzuki motor in there. Well, Arctic Cat made by Suzuki. And I guess I call them a ZRT. Got to clean this up just a little bit. And it's in really nice shape. But I just want to see if I can get it to fire up. So I pulled the plugs out and just checked inside there. It's pull start, so it's an old man nightmare for me. And I'm just going to get a little bit of chainsaw gas and just drop it in each cylinder. See if I can't get it to fire that way. But it's got the old Mikunis in there, like you used to see on the dirt bikes. And I'm looking at the intake manifolds, and they're rubber. So I got to be a little bit careful about that because it's been sitting. And they eventually weather and sometimes get weather checked. But they look like they're in excellent shape. A little bit of surface rust on the mufflers. Well, on the expansion chambers. Might be a fun project just to pull them out and clean them and put some paint on those things, right? But I think first things first, let's just see what we have. See if we can't get this thing to run. Choke on. No engine fire. No engine fire, no go. Why would I not be seeing spark? Alright, we got another set of problems. Well, I got something going on. So, one of the techniques, I've got this little plug. You see this right here? This wire comes up out of the ignition system from the motor and goes to the wiring harness. The wiring harness, I don't know if you can see, is right here. It's kind of corroded a little bit. But this jumper allows you to jump the ignition system so it's actually grounded and will fire. And it looks to me like I have spark now. So we're going to try again. See if we can get it to run with that jumper cable in there. And then, if that's the problem, we'll have to start doing some checking in the wiring to figure out how come I can't seem to get power to the spark plug. So let's start this whole process again. This one goes to the middle. This one goes right here. Let's see if we have a running motor now. I'm not a snowmobile guy, but that's a 2-stroke. And damn, that looks like a lot of fun to me. So I think we're going to put just a little bit of time in that. Debug the wiring harness, because I'm sure I'm not the first and won't be the last person to have to figure that out. But the different kinds of ignition systems, you know, some of them are open, some of them are closed, you know. And this one here, you have to close it to run it. So I've got to get a multimeter and figure out how come that combination of wiring harness, kill switch, and key are not allowing that circuit to be made. You know, it has to be a closed loop there in order to let that ignition run on this particular machine. And thank God for this. And also thank God I saw this, because this was my clue. You know, different kinds of ignition systems have different characteristics. And I happened to see that in the emergency pack, and I said, huh, I'll bet you anything this is one of those systems where you gotta, actually like the old Mercuries. Some of the old Mercuries are the same way, where we actually have to make the connection in order to let it run. Well, I think we got it running. And what it was there was a connection that was between the ignition system. It's just one plug between the ignition system and the rest of the wiring harness. And it was fairly well corroded. And I'm thinking that was the problem, because as soon as I jumpered it, that ignition, it ran fine, you know. So then I cleaned up the plug as best I could, and tried to fire it up again, and it fired right up. So to me, that's evidence that we have a running snowmobile. The reason why this is going to become a whole lot more important is simply because winter has come in with an absolute bang, and bird crap off the windshield and stuff. Get this thing cleaned up, make it look like it's supposed to. I don't know what this stuff is, but it smells like coconut oil. It's cleaning. And I have a bunch of saw stuff to do. You know, I've been doing more, you know, work-related saw stuff, so I haven't been putting it on video. But that means I'm not updating the channel as often as I think I should. So maybe I'm going to change my policy a little bit and put a little bit more of my work-related saw work back on the video. I've taken a lot of that off. One of the things we're going to do this weekend, and one of the conversations that we have to have, I'm going to let Bob talk about a little more, but we've gotten to the point where the channel itself is big enough. It's almost too big for us to handle, you know? So a couple things I may end up having to do is just basically set the expectation level that I'm not going to be able to get back to some of the people who want to talk to us. And Bob won't be able to answer all the calls that come to the store just because he can't juggle that many balls when he has so many calls coming in. He's just one guy, you know? So you have to set the expectation level that, you know, he's going to be dealing with local business. That's where he has to focus. The channel, you know, I'll be dealing with the channel stuff. And when Bob has a little time, he'll help out. But some things have changed in his world where he's going to need to focus a little bit more on things closer to home. And then maybe what I'll do is pick a couple of guys and say, you know something, I'd really appreciate it if you could keep track of the messaging. You know? We're very rapidly approaching 6,500 subs, and that's just a step away from 7,000, and at the rate it's going, before I know it, I'm going to be up to 10,000 subs. And never ever, first of all, I want to thank the people who have supported the channel. And the second thing I want to say is we had no idea that there'd be anybody interested in watching a couple old guys talk about chainsaws, you know. That was a fairly obscure subject when we first started to saw. And we learned pretty quickly that there's a lot of people interested in doing that. And the Chinese thing, I gotta tell you, that makes me laugh. Because that truly was a spoof. I mean, we first did that. It was me and my wife, and we had been on vacation in Lake of the Ozarks back in, I don't know, 2014 or 15. I think it was 2015. And we literally did a video because we were inspired by watching the girls put together a jigsaw puzzle, you know. I kind of thought to myself, you know, with all these aftermarket parts, and there was a kind of a movement towards trying to see, as a gaff, it was a gaff for a lot of people, can you put together a saw with all that stuff? You know, and I was evaluating the aftermarket parts because I really didn't have access to good prices with steel parts. And a couple of the guys who I was supporting at the time had steel saws. You can't make this stuff up. So I didn't know, you know, I just didn't know which of the aftermarket parts you could buy and then actually put on saws where you weren't going to, you know, compromise your relationship with a customer. I didn't know which ones were good enough. And set about to try to find out. Both Bob and I did. And of course, our reference was Husqvarna at first, so we did the Hudzel big bore 52 millimeter, you know, bearings and stuff like that. We started with that, a couple of the top ends, and then I had a couple of guys that had steels, because steel's bigger around here than Husqvarna, and I had no way of supporting it at all. So I really did have to come up with a plan. And rather than go one piece at a time, the concept of building a complete saw was spurred on by some of the activity online where there were some copies out there. And some of those copies were being built by companies that basically supplied aftermarket parts to dealers. So to me, that first gaff, that first chainsaw puzzle of putting together a bunch of aftermarket parts into a saw was a 660 steel, I believe. There was fun and games in that, but there was also some real information that I was looking for to see what I could actually use to support my customer base. And putting together a complete saw is a more efficient way of testing those parts than doing one at a time. That's how it started for me. And of course that morphed into them deciding to sell complete kits. And that's how that all started. And I'm not sure what part I had in that, But my first dealings with that and my first intent was simply to test parts because I needed a source of steel parts. It was a legitimate way for me to test the parts. Man, has it grown. You know, the channel is just completely different than what I anticipated it would be. And you know, and Bob and I were talking about the channel and where it's going to go, and how many times can you build a 372? You know, when there's something different, like possibly a different top end or a different technique, that's worth doing another video. But just to keep building the same thing over and over, putting cases together, after a while, there's a point where that's no longer interesting. And that's one of the reasons why I'm morphing it into the outboards, is because that's something that I'm interested in and plan to do more of. So we're going to see more and more projects along those lines. Because guess what? It's two strokes that are common to both, right? I know the new outboards are all four-stroke emission things, but one of the central themes that's been with my channel from the beginning is trying to enjoy these things without spending lots and lots of money, but also trying to get to a technology where an average person can do it versus having to go get specialized tools. Now, I know we pushed the edge with the Husqvarna with the auto-tunes. I did that because I think people need to understand that technology, but I know that takes away from the hobby because it takes away a couple of degrees of freedom a person has to build their own saws. So, you know, what you're seeing here, combination of the motorcycles, which I can't ride anymore, and the snowmobile, which I shouldn't ride, but I'm going to need to because of winter, is really, again, a way to enjoy two strokes, the mechanical inclination to play with them, and do it for the amount of money an average person can handle without being completely indebted to the toys. I have, in this snowmobile right here, I've got maybe $1,200 total. And that's including oil and purchase price and everything. And it's in nice shape. There's a lot of these type sleds around that are decent. I'm not a snowmobile guy, so I'm not going there. I'm just telling you that you can find stuff like this for that kind of money all over the place in the Northeast. And I'm sure northern parts of the country as well as Canada. It's not hard to find this era snowmobile for $1,000. It's in good shape. Part of it's because, like motorcycles, these things have evolved radically from the 70s through the 80s into the 90s. And just like with the motorcycles where you had the big suspension revolution in the 70s into the 80s, these did too. You know, the new snowmobiles, the combination of stand-up ergonomics and the suspension is so radically different than this. It's not even, they're completely different league machines. But that doesn't matter to me. I mean, I don't care. You know, I just like having fun with them. So I know this is a tangent, but I wanted to explain a little bit about where we came from, where we're going, and why this thing is showing up on the channel. And the biggest reason this is showing up on the channel is because of what is outside. I hope you all enjoy your Thanksgiving, and I hope the videos that we provide over time will continue to be entertaining, possibly more so as we venture off into things like, well, the outboards, which you've already seen a couple, and maybe, I don't know how much I'm going to do with this. This, again, is like that 20 horsepower outboard. I bought this expecting to have to do a lot of work to it. I don't know. Let's see what it does. You know? That's it. That's about all I had to do after connecting up the plug. The undercarriage looks like it's pretty fresh, actually. Of course, that's a big 800-pound gorilla in a lot of these old sleds. You know, condition is how good is the undercarriage. But I think it's in good shape. We will look and we will see. And I'll take a look and see what I can do. But it's not a left turn. It's kind of something I have to do because of what's going on outside. Look at that. Just take that in for a second. This is the day before Thanksgiving. Talk to you later. Bye for now.